In the 1970s, an increasing number of women gained the independence to attend college. This was the time when a false sense of security led many individuals to hitchhike. Unfortunately for many unlucky people, sadistic killers were expecting trusting people to have their guards down. One of these killers terrorized the area of Santa Cruz, California. Hello, welcome back to my channel where I deep dive into true crime, paranormal phenomena, cults, and history. Please like and subscribe. So I do apologize for the delay in posting, but I'm back. I will have a break at some point in the next few weeks, but I'm going to plan to have some content. Without further ado, let's get into today's case. Today's case takes place in Santa Cruz, California, situated on the northern edge of Monterey Bay, where the Pacific Ocean meets cliffs, dense redwood forests, and winding mountain roads. In the 1970s, this small college town became the hunting ground for not one, but three infamous serial killers. Women would hitchhike with a seemingly gentle man, but never be seen again. Today I'm discussing the case of serial killer Ed Kemper, aka the co-ed killer. Edmund Emil Kemper III was born on December 18, 1948, in Burbank, California. He weighed a whopping 13 pounds at birth. He had an older sister, Susan, who was 5 years old when he was born. He also had a younger sister, Ellen, who was born when he was 2 years old. Yep, he was the middle child of 3 children, which is not indicative of what he would do, but may explain his relationship with his mother. His mother was Clarnell Kemper. His father, Edmund Kemper Jr., a World War II veteran, worked at the Pacific Proving Grounds in Marshall Islands, testing nuclear weapons. He returned to California and worked as an electrician. Ed's home life was full of tension, to say the least. Clarnell was a strict mother and ruled the household. There was a lot of friction between Clarnell and Edmund, Ed's father. She mocked his choice of occupation as electrician, calling it a menial job. Edmund said that suicide missions in wartime and the atomic bomb testings were nothing compared to living with Clarnell. So that's very telling of what they were dealing with. Clarnell had been described as a dominant, neurotic woman who abused alcohol and belittled and abused her son. She refused to coddle him because she did not want to turn him gay. I have to say, this is so stupid. Like, that's not even how it works, Clarnell. And so what if he was gay? That's way better than being a murderous freak, which he turned out anyways. Edmund pulled away from his son because he was sick of constant arguments about this, which destroyed Ed. This caused him to act out to get attention. He was very intelligent, but his grades were horrendous. School was not any better for Ed as he got bullied. I mentioned he weighed 13 pounds at birth, was extremely tall for his age, so he would get picked on because, well, kids are dead. Not only was Clarnell awful to Ed, but his sisters also were. I kind of going back and forth with this. It could be them learning from their mother, but I wonder if it could be a response to Ed's behavior, or maybe all along he's just trying to get back at his sisters. I couldn't really find an answer to that question. Ed would perform, let's say, rituals with their dolls. He'd remove their head and hands. I feel like this could be a normal brother messing with his sister thing, because I have known guys who have done that to their sister, and they're not serial killers. But anyways, now I also think it could just be messing with his sister, or it could, given what would happen later in his life, it is pretty creepy. Susan also tried to seriously hurt him twice, once trying to push him in front of a train, and another trying to push him in the deep end of a pool, leading him to almost drown. I also read that he was molested by his cousin, but again, that was something I couldn't really find a law on. This brings me to talk about these games that Ed would play with his sisters. He called them the gas chamber and the electric chair. He would have his younger sister Ellen blindfold him and flip an imaginary switch, and he would fall to the ground and make his body look like he was being electrocuted or that he was suffocated by gas. Another thing I think that shaped his future was when he was 7, he attended a magic show. The magician did the trick where the volunteer lays their head in a guillotine and the blades come down. Basically, it does not really cut your head off, it just appears to. So a young girl volunteered, and just the fantasy of her being decapitated set off twisted desires in Ed. He later discussed how these started his fantasies later on in life. All that being said, he did some terrifying stuff, Like other serial killers, he had a history of cruelty to animals. This is one red flag of becoming a serial killer, according to the McDonald triad. At the young age of 10, he buried the family's cat alive, dug it up, decapitated it, mounted his head on a spike. He delighted over the fact that he got away with it and his family were still looking for it. At 13, the family had a cat who his sister was close to. He killed the cat and left the parts of the cat in his closet. Yeah, basically killed the cat because it favored his sister. Sick. When he was out of town visiting family, his mother found the cat remains. Obviously, she lost it. I did find out that serial killers target cats because they remind them of females, which makes sense. Also, he did not have any friends because he thought he was too smart for the kids at school. Another huge red flag. Screaming narcissist. Clarnell made Ed sleep in the basement because she was afraid that he would harm his sisters. Ed even overheard her on the phone to his father, saying that he was a real weirdo. Look, if the girls are sharing a room, and that is the only spare room, and basements can be made livable, but I doubt she made the proper changes. Also, it just seems like he was ostracized from the family. I do not think the space was an issue. He used to sleep upstairs, so she either saw some scary signs, or she was just a witch. With a B. If she felt like he was in danger, she should have gotten him help, but she did not. Not only would he have been forced to sleep there, but she would lock him in, so he would be in a dark basement alone, no way out. It sounds absolutely terrifying. She just treated him horribly, not the way she treated her daughters. At the slightest disobedience, she'd be quick to slap Ed. It was thought he scared her, because he was this angry giant. By the time he was 15, he was 6 feet tall, but she would also mock his height, so I'm guessing she did it to show him that she was not scared. She would say he was a real weirdo and that no woman would ever love him. It's believed that she had borderline personality disorder. Susan teased Ed, telling him to kiss his second-grade teacher. He replied with a chilling comeback for a 7-year-old child, saying that if he kissed her, he would have to kill her. He had a weird fascination with his teacher. He even snuck out of the home. Taking his father's gun, he went to her home and watched her through the window, bayonet in hand. A bayonet is a blade inserted in a rifle to create a spear for close combat. He said that he had fantasies of shooting her and having intercourse with her body. It goes downhill for Ed from here. Like I said, Ed was very close to his father, but unfortunately his parents separated in 1959 and later divorced in 1961. This completely devastated Ed. To make it worse, this left him solely in the care of Clarnell in Montana. His father stayed in California, moving outside of Los Angeles. At the age of 14, he ran away from his Montana home to Van Nuys in California. Ed Sr. was remarried and living with his wife and stepson. He later said that he cared more for his new family than him. For some reason, he made his stepmother uncomfortable and tension was mounting. She developed chronic migraines from ongoing stress with Ed. They went to his grandparents to have a Christmas visit in December 1963. This turned out to be a ruse, and his dad actually took him there to stay with his grandparents. There were some sources that said he went back to his mother and she sent him back, but I think the first one is more accurate as I found it more often. His grandparents lived on a ranch in North Fork, California. He was not too happy about this, but he made the best of it at first. He attended Sierra Joint Union High School in Toll House, California, a nearby town. According to teachers, he was a quiet but average student. He did have one friend, Mike, but this friendship ended shortly after Mike's mom realized that a pillow and her cat went missing. Although she had no proof, she was wary of Ed. His grandparents were Maud Matilda and Edmund Emil Kemper Sr. Maud was said to be abusive both verbally and emotionally. She would also belittle both him and his grandfather, who had dementia. Needless to say, he hated her, and honestly, I do not blame him. Obviously, doesn't excuse what happened soon in this case. His feelings make sense, is what I'm saying. Emotional abuse fucks you up mentally. Edmund Sr. gave his grandson a .22 caliber gun, which terrified Maud because she saw incidents of rage from him. He began to shoot birds and even attempted to shoot other wild animals. Maud tried to hide the gun. She was afraid that he would take it when she was not paying attention, but Ed Sr. said, "It's fine, let him shoot the birds that are coming up and ruining our farm. Let's give him something to do." On August 27, 1964, he got in an argument with his grandmother. Maud was sitting at the kitchen table. I found a source that said they were going over proofs for the children's book she was working on. She looked up to see him giving her a strange stare. So she's like, "What the hell? You're freaking me out." Of course, that's paraphrasing. At the time, Ed Sr. was at the store. Ed grabbed a rifle, shot his grandmother 3 times, once in the back of the head, twice in the back. Then he stabbed her several times. He then heard his grandfather's car in the drive-thru and shot him in the head and killed him. He called his mother Clarnell to tell her what he just did. She told him to call the police, so he did, and waiting for them to arrive. He told them that he wanted to know what it would feel like to kill his grandmother, and he did not like the way she would emasculate his grandfather. He killed his grandfather because he did not want him to be mad at him, as if death would stop that. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia when he was evaluated by psychiatrists. On December 6, 1964, he was sentenced to the Atascadero State Hospital specifically for mentally ill convicts. He admitted to fantasies of shooting Maud, one time imagined shooting her in the outhouse. He even took his rifle and lined up the shot once, when she was not paying attention. Now at Atascadero, the psychiatrists and social workers strongly disagree with the court findings. They said that no flight of ideas, no interference with the thought, no expression of delusions or hallucinations, and no evidence of bizarre thinking. They discovered that he had an IQ of 136, which later was increased to 145, indicating he was extremely advanced or genius-level intelligence. They decided that instead of paranoid schizophrenia, he suffers from passive-aggressive personality disorder. He became a model prisoner and soon won over the psychiatrists, so much that they allowed him to administer psychiatric tests to other inmates. That's wild that a prisoner would be allowed a job like that. But he also joined the JCs, which is basically an organization where young adults aged 18 to 40 focus on leadership, community service, and personal development. This piqued my interest because I know of another infamous serial killer that was part of this group, John Wayne Gacy. Well, Ed used this knowledge of these tests to manipulate his psychiatrist into thinking he was better and could be in the community. On December 18, 1969, on Ed's 21st birthday, he was released on parole. He proved, or rather manipulated, professionals into thinking he was rehabilitated. It is insane he murdered 2 people, his grandparents none the least, and only got 5 years. Psychiatrists adamantly opposed his being released into Clarnell's custody given her passive abuse. Despite their recommendation, he was released to Clarnell. At this time, she was remarried and divorced again. She was now living in Aptos and working at the University of California in Santa Cruz as an administrative assistant. He continued to show his rehabilitation and was successful, so on November 29, 1972, his criminal record was expunged. Part of his parole was to continue school. He started attending classes at community college. He attempted to become a police officer, but he did not meet the height requirements. The cutoff for the height in California at the time was 5'8", and remember, Ed is 6'4". This is no longer a rule. There was a lot of discrimination lawsuits leading to them to take away height requirements despite his rejection to join the police department. He would hang around police officers, specifically a cop bar called the Jury Room. It said that he was a friendly nuisance to the cops. The officers nicknamed him Big Ed. He was devastated, but it's definitely good he did not become a cop. He probably would have had a higher body count. He went from job to job for a while until 1971 when he obtained employment with the State of California Division of Highways. His relationship with Clarnell remained toxic as ever. They would have fights that Ed described as violent and vicious. The arguments would be so loud that the neighbors would overhear. They were always over something small, once being over if he should get his teeth cleaned. He saved up and moved out with a friend in the city of Almeda. This did not stop the toxicity with Clarnell, however. She would call him often and make surprise visits, talk about needing boundaries. It's like she enjoyed torturing her son. He ended up moving back with Clarnell after having financial struggles. He met a young girl at beach who he became engaged to in March 1973. She was attending Hallett High School. He was 24, dating a 17-year-old. They broke up when he was arrested for the second time, and her parents requested that identity was kept private. Clarnell also did not approve of this relationship for good reason. She kept getting on his case about finding someone close to his age. She was a horrible mother, but I mean, she was not wrong. He said that if she was so concerned she could find someone that she approved of. She said there's not a way she would introduce him to any of her students. They are too good for him. She also said that He's just like his father and would probably abandon his family like him. The same year, he was riding a motorcycle and was hit by a car. He injured his leg pretty badly. He sued the driver and was awarded $15,000, which today is $120,000. With his settlement, he bought a yellow 1969 Ford Galaxy. As you can see, it's kind of resembled a unmarked police car. He would also see women walking around hitchhiking. He got a light bulb moment and started packing a toolkit of plastic bags, knives, blankets, and handcuffs. He soon would pick over 150 hitchhikers, but he would let them go unharmed. He basically used these unknown hitchhikers to study and observe their reactions to him. Soon he began having homicidal urges, which he referred to as little zappies. Then he made changes to the Galaxy to make it easier to commit his murders, such as removing the antenna and rigging the passenger's door handle to be unable to open from the inside. On May 7th, 1972, Ed was driving in Berkeley, California. Two female students who were hitchhiking. They were called Mary Ann Pesce and Anita Mary Luchessa. Mary Ann was one of 5 children. She grew up in a wealthy family living near a lot of famous people. The family even spent 7 years living in Germany, where she was able to travel throughout Europe. Mary enjoyed to ski and even had dreams of competing on an Olympic level. She attended college with her brother, which made her parents more comfortable letting her go away to college. Being able to look out for each other. Anita grew up on a family farm as the oldest child. She lived on campus during the week, but would come home almost every weekend. She was very close to her family. The girls came from different backgrounds, and Mary experienced more of the world, but their dynamics worked. They were Fresno State University students attempted to get to Stanford to visit friends. So they were offered a ride by friends, but feeling adventurous, they turned them down to hitchhike. Unfortunately, this is when they met Ed. They were apprehensive after seeing Ed and how big he was. He claimed to be a student and had bumper stickers that he got from his mom, which put the girls at ease. When they got into his car, he does a maneuver that he perfected where he would pick up the hitchhikers and let them go, where he acts like he did not close the door properly, leans over, and closes. But when he closes it, he drops his chapstick in the handle, blocking it from being open. Mary and Anita were distracted, talking, and Ed took advantage of this to change directions. Almada. Obviously, once they realized that he changed the route, they start panicking. Soon he reached a secluded forest in Almada that he was familiar with from his highway job. As he approached his secluded area, he quietly grabbed the gun under his seat and held it straight out towards the women. He told the women that if they cooperate, he would let them go, and Mary Ann agreed. Ed locked Anita in the truck. He handcuffed Mary and laid her across the front seat, face down. While handcuffing Mary, he accidentally brushed her breast with the back of his hand. He apologized to her. Then he put a plastic bag over her head and used a terry cloth in an attempt to strangle her. She bit a hole in the bag and broke the cloth, then kicked the tail light out while trying to fight back. This enraged Ed, so he pulled out a knife and stabbed her repeatedly. Finally, he would slit her throat. Now imagine how horrific this was for Anita. She was locked inside the trunk, listening to her friend being stabbed and strangled, knowing that she's most likely going to have the same fate. He then got Anita out of the truck, grabbed a larger knife, and stabbed her multiple times. She initially was not dead, but in very bad shape. He said that he chose the women because they seemed upper class, because he was uninterested in women that were, in his words, scroungy, messy, dirty, smelly, hippie types. Ed put both Anita and Mary's bodies in the trunk of his car. He headed back to his apartment. He got pulled over by a police officer because he had broken a taillight. Sadly, the cop did not have any idea that he had 2 corpses in his truck. There were no signs that there was anything suspicious in his truck, and cops can't check the trunks of cars that they pull over without probable cause. He let them go, and Ed would go on to murder 6 more women. He returned to the home that he shared with his friend. He took Mary and Anita's bodies into the apartment. He photographed and had sexually assaulted the corpse. He dismembered the bodies, disposed of them in plastic trash bags in the Loma Prieta Mountains. He also had possession of their severed heads. This gets disturbing, but he used their heads to receive oral sex. After this hard act, he threw their heads into a ravine. The next day, both Mary and Ann's family reported her missing. They told the families that they probably ran away with a surfer guy to live their carefree life. I know, this makes no sense, and we see in time and time again in true crime. Family ended up hiring a private investigator who unfortunately did not find the girls. In August 1972, a hiker was in the mountains and found Mary's skull, but her body was not found after extensive search. The rest of Mary's body has never been found. Unfortunately, none of Anita's body has ever been recovered. It was not long after her head was found that word spread throughout town. Ed was at the police bar, jury room that he would frequent and overhear the news. He took his opportunity to listen to the officers there talk about the findings and hear what the investigation was at this point. He was able to build rapport and trust with them, even though he was a civilian, which shielded him from suspicion. On September 14th, 1972, a high school girl named Aiko Koo was hitchhiking. Aiko was a 15-year-old Korean girl. She was raised by her mother and her grandparents. They doted on her and just knew how successful she would be. She loved to dance. From what I read, she was a really talented belly dancer. The family was not wealthy by any means. Her mom would not only handmake all her costumes, but would work multiple jobs just to put her in the most prestigious dance academies. Her father was not in the picture, but Aiko never wanted for anything because her mother took care of it and encouraged her dreams. She was the mother that everyone deserved. She was on her way to dance class, but she missed her bus to get to dance class and sadly decided to hitchhike. Feeling desperate to get to dance class on time, she accepted a ride from Ed Kemper. She saw his gun, caught on his plan, began to panic. He pulled the gun on her. He used some BS excuse of him trying to use it on himself, and if she did not signal police, he would not hurt her. So she calmed down, thinking she had no choice. Ed drove into the mountain, turned off the main road. He drove her to a secluded area like he did with Marianne and Anita. He got out of the vehicle and made a mistake. He left the gun in the car and accidentally locked himself out, leaving Aiko inside with the gun. Unfortunately, he convinced her to let him inside, where he then taped her mouth shut and attempted to suffocate her body by his gross fingers in her mouth. He strangled her using her scarf into unconsciousness, sexually assaulted her, and stabbed her to death. Ed put her body into the truck and stopped at a bar. Remember, this is the cop bar he attended. When he left the bar, he opened the truck to admire his catch. That was his words. As he previously, Ed brought her back to his apartment, committed necrophilia on her body, dismembered her remains, he decapitated her, and I think this stems from his fascination with the magician trick he witnessed as a teen. He put her head and drives around with it for the day. He attended a court-appointed therapy. The therapist told him he felt as Ed was rehabilitated and that he does not need to see him. Little does he know the crimes he had been committed or the body parts in his car. After the appointment, he disposed of the head and the hands in separate locations. Aiko's mother was worried when she never showed up to her home by 11 p.m. She called the dance studio, but was told she never made it there. This was not like her. She reported her missing to the police. They took her disappearance more seriously because she was a minor. She also put up missing person posters, and they searched the area nightly and talked to people at the bus stop. They were also told that she missed her bus and not wanting to miss class. In an important audition, she hitched a ride from someone in a tan car. That was it. A larger male driver. By January of 1973, Ed blew through his lawsuit money, $15,000. He could not afford his apartment anymore and begrudgingly moved back into Clarnell's house. She was toxic as ever, belittling and criticizing him. There was initial warning out not to hitchhike unless it was in groups, and if a girl was caught trying to hitchhike solo, then they would take her to the station. Because of this, Ed would lay low for almost 4 months. By this time, the fear subsided and women let their guards down again. In 1973, he bought a .22 caliber automatic pistol. The actual date of this next crime varies based on sources from the 7th to the 8th. My assumption is it begins on the 7th and goes into the early hours of the 8th, so I'll go on that since I could not find a definite answer. So he buys the pistol, and this is despite the fact that he has a record and is not allowed to own weapons. He was concerned that he would get caught, but he still went out looking for a new victim. He was driving around the campus of Cabrillo College. This is when he picked up a 18-year-old named Cynthia Ann Schall, or Cindy as she was nicknamed. She grew up in San Francisco and was the oldest of 2 daughters. She made extra money babysitting when not studying. She was debating on either pursuing a career as a teacher or a police officer, but unfortunately she never got the chance to decide. Ed drove them to a wooded, secluded area near Watsonville. He forced her into his truck where he shot her with his new .22 caliber pistol. He drove her back to his mother's home in Aptos. Clarnell was not home, so he put Cindy in his closet. In the morning after his mother left for work, he assaulted Cindy's corpse. He removed the bullet from her body, dismembered, and decapitated her in his mother's bathtub. He kept her severed head for weeks before burying it in Clarnell's garden, facing towards her bedroom window. He said he did this because she always wanted people to look up to her, which is just so sick. He disposed the rest of the body in plastic bags by throwing it off a cliff into the ocean. Less than 24 hours later, everything but her head and her right hand was found. It was determined that a power saw was used to dismember her. He worried that he was too sloppy, so he decided to take a break. Except this time it would only be a month. So his murders are happening closer together, so he's escalating. The police did connect the murders and issued a warning not to hitchhike and only accept rides from people with university stickers on the vehicle. Unfortunately, Clarnell worked at the university, so he got one from her. On February 5th, 1973, Ed got into another fight with his mother and left the house. Pissed off, with a campus sticker on his car, he did what he always did when their fights got really bad. He went hunting for a new victim. This was on the University of California, Santa Cruz campus, and he saw a 23-year-old named Rosalind Thorpe. Rosalind was a beautiful and smart student with a promising future. She just finished her studies for psychology and logistics. She lived in an apartment with 4 other students, one of which said that last time she saw her, she was leaving to attend a school lecture. Rosalind was leaving a building after attending the lecture. Usually she rode her bicycle home, but it was raining, and when Ed offered her a ride, she decided to accept his offer. She thought he was a student, and she got in the passenger seat and engaged in conversation with him. He then saw a young girl he described as a small Chinese girl thumbing for a ride. This was 20-year-old Alice Helen Liu. She wanted to change the world. She was part of a program in high school where she gave tours and clothing to PAPCO, Native American teens. She was working on schooling for Oriental Studies. Alice lived with another girl and would regularly hitchhike as a means to get to and from school. She entered the backseat of his car. He drove them for a while, then distracted Rosalind by showing her a beautiful view out the window. He slowed down his car. He pointed his pistol at Rosalind and shot her in the head. He then turned and pointed the pistol at Alice. She crouched down in the backseat and understandably started to panic. He fired the gun at her, but the first 2 shots missed. Then he shot her a third, hitting her in the temple. Surprisingly, Alice was still alive. So once out of town, Ed shot her again, killing her. He then pulled into a quiet cul-de-sac and transferred the bodies into his truck, wrapping them in blankets. He stopped for gas and went home. He abruptly left, claiming he needed to buy cigarettes. Once outside, he parked on the street. He beheaded them in his car. Must have been so freaking messy. At any rate, Ed carried out the headless bodies inside the house to violate them as he did the other murders. Ed continued his pattern of dismemberment and removing the bullets. He disposed of the remains at Eden Canyon. When they never returned home to their respected homes, they were reported missing. It should be noted that the 2 women did not know one another, but people were hoping that they met and ran off together. As humans, we do not want to overthink and think the worst. 10 days later, on February 15th, some of their remains were found. At this time, Ed is getting worried and thinking that he was making mistakes because the bodies being found really fast. At this time, another serial killer named Herbert Mullins was frequent. He murdered 13 victims in California and claimed it was to prevent earthquakes. If this is someone you'd like me to talk about, please let me know. Back to the story. He was to thought have murdered Ed's victims, which Ed took very personally, and this would be his downfall, his ego. A few days later, after Herbert's arrest, a gun dealer that sold Ed his gun contacted the police saying that he needed a more in-depth background check on Ed. He really should have done this before selling the gun, not 2 months later, but I digress. They check and see that he was charged with the murder of his grandparents when he was a kid. Detectives know Ed from the bar and did not want to rock the boat, so they send out a rookie detective. So the rookie is trying to locate Clarnell's home, having trouble finding it, sees this giant man, and turns out it's Ed. They say he's polite and hands over his weapon until they complete the background check. He notices when the weapon is out of the truck that he has no lining in his trunk, but he did not think anything of it, and no one suspected him. In late March, the rest of the women's remains were discovered. On April 20th, 1973, Ed would commit his final and probably the most disturbing murders. To make it worse, it was on Good Friday, 2 days before Easter. He was awoke by his mother, Clarnell, arriving home from a party. She retired to her bedroom to read a book before bed. She heard her door open to find Ed in the doorway. She callously said, "Or I suppose you want me to sit up all night and talk now?" He replied, "No, good night," and returned to his room and waited for her to fall asleep. When she was sleeping, he crept into her room and bludgeoned her with a claw hammer and then slit her throat with a penknife. Unlike his other victims, he beheaded her, but this time he put her head on a shelf and just yelled at her for an hour. Then he did a lot of horrendous things to her head, like threw darts at her face, raping it. Then he smashed her face and cut her tongue and larynx, disposing of them in a garbage disposal. Her vocal cords were ejected, being too tough to break down, and landed back into the sink. Later, Ed said of this, "That seemed appropriate with as much as she bitched and screamed and yelled at me over the years." He also dismembered and committed sexual acts on her. Ed put Clarnell's body into a closet and cleaned the house of any crime. He left the house to have a drink at a local bar. When he returned home, he phoned Clarnell's friends Sara, Taylor, Hallett, or Sally, but she did not answer. This panicked him until she finally called him. He informed her that he wanted to have a surprise dinner for Clarnell, and unfortunately Sally, she did agree to go. When Sally got to the house, Ed strangled her, first by hand, then with a scarf he kept from his victim, Aiko. He undressed Sally, laid her on the bed, and molested her body. Then he wrote a note that said, "Approximately 5:15 a.m. Saturday. No need for her to suffer anymore at the hands of this horrible, murderous butcher. It was quick, asleep, the way I wanted it. Not a sloppy and incomplete, gents. Just a lack of time. I got things to do." Ed then fled the scene, driving to Pueblo, Colorado, using Sally's car on Easter morning. He rented another car and left his at the gas station, saying it needed repairs. He took caffeine pills to stay awake for the next 1,000-mile drive. He drove for the next 18 hours, only stopping for sodas and gas. He was stopped once for speeding, but paid the fine and seemed calm, so no suspicion against him was ever noted. He also had 3 guns in his car and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. He was paranoid and convinced police were looking for him. After arriving in Pueblo, he noticed that he still had not heard any news on the radio about his mother or Sally's murder. His ego must have gotten the best of him, because this is when he stopped at a phone booth to call the police. He confessed to the murders of Clarnell and Sally. The police did not believe him and just told him to call back later. A few hours later, he called back to talk to an officer he knew personally and confessed again to killing his mother and friend. He knew the cops, so they thought he was messing with him, but after all, he was known to be a harmless Big Ed, but he was adamant that he really did murder them. He waited for the police to take him into custody. While waiting on police, local police break a back window on Clarnell's house to search for the 2 women. They opened one of the closets. They saw tons of blood and hair, and when they arrested Ed, he confessed to his first 6 murders of Mary, Anita, Aiko, Cindy, Rosalind, and Alice. Because he later said he turned himself in because, quote, "the original purpose was gone. It wasn't serving any physical or real emotional purpose. It was just pure waste of time. Emotionally, I couldn't handle it much longer. Towards the end there, I started to feel the folly of the whole damn thing and the whole point near exhaustion, near collapse. I just said to hell with it and called it off." This is also when he was given the moniker the co-ed killer. When he was in interrogation, he confessed to all 8 murders in excruciating detail. He then took detectives to the various dump sites. He continued to confess in more detail. He just said he could not help himself. Good thing he did, because without his confession, I'm not sure we would have ever been caught for it, or it would have taken a very long time. On April 23rd, 1973, at the age of 24, he was charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder. On May 7, 1973, Ed was indicted on the 8 counts of first-degree murder. He was defended by the chief public defender of Santa Cruz at the time, Jim Jackson. Given that Ed bluntly confessed to all 8 murders, Jim's only option was for him to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. Upon his arrest, he attempted to kill himself twice before he would even go on trial. Luckily, that was unsuccessful. His trial began on October 23, 1973. He was examined by 3 separate psychiatrists, one of which was Dr. Joel Fort, who testified his findings. He looked into Ed's juvenile records, including his diagnosis of psychosis after murdering his grandparent. He conducted an interview while giving him truth serum. Truth serum is a psychiatric active drug to lower ambitions and get a person to talk. It is not really used now. They are not really accurate and sometimes result in false confessions. This may have been the case for Ed. He confessed to slicing flesh from his victim's legs, cooking into a casserole, and cannibalizing it. He later recanted this admission. Joel determined that Ed was fully aware of his actions and enjoyed his notoriety of becoming a serial killer. He meticulously planned out murdering people. Prior to his crimes, he picked up women to gauge their reactions and what made them trust. Joel testified that his crimes were premeditated and that if he was to get released, he would murder again. Let's not forget he murdered his own grandparents, went to a psychiatric hospital, got treatment, and ended up being one of the most notorious serial killers of all time. His doctors from Atascadero State Hospital tried to testify to his mental health diagnoses. Even his sisters Ellen testified. She described a fight between Clarnell and Ed. They were both drinking and he hit her. She told Ellen that Ed hit her 3 times, but he said once. Her arms were covered in bruises. She refused to leave her house or answer the door until they healed. Ellen said that she told Clarnell to kick him out before it was too late, but Clarnell seemed worried about Ed and where he would go. Ellen called a few days later to check on her mother, but said they worked it out and everything was fine now. She talked to Ed, who was upset. Clarnell told her about the fight, that it was between him and her mother. She also gave insight into Clarnell that she had a rough exterior to protect herself from showing emotions. She was also blunt about opinions and that she did that a lot with Ed, which caused friction. The jury was not buying it for good reason. He dug his hole even deeper when he testified on his behalf, which rarely works out. He said of his victims, "They were distant, not shared with me. I was trying to establish a relationship, and there was no relationship to have there. When they were killed, there wasn't anything going on in my mind except for that they were going to be mine." He went on to say that this is why he killed cats as a boy, because they loved his sisters more. Animals can also tell what type of person someone is, but he said that if he killed the cats, they would be all his. What an absolute freak. He even called his victims his spirit wives, saying that he possessed their spirits. The jury deliberated for only 5 hours, finding him guilty on all counts. He later said that he was not surprised he was found guilty, that society was not ready to find him insane. 10 to 20 years from now, they will. Yeah, jackass, they still aren't. Don't get me wrong, I think that he's a complete psychopath, but he knew what he was doing. Ed really wanted the death penalty, specifically death torture. Capital punishment was put on a temporary hold, so the Supreme Court of California could not invoke the death penalty. Look, so I don't personally agree with the death penalty, except maybe in extreme cases. I just think it's final, and there's people who are falsely convicted, obviously not in this case. I also kind of think it would be the easy way out. I think that they have to live the rest of their lives in a cell. In Ed's case in particular, he wanted to be tortured to death. The death penalty would give him what he wants. So instead, he was sentenced to 7 years to life for each count. So he was set to serve his sentence at the California Medical Facility in Vacaville. Vacaville is an all-men's prison medical facility. He shared the same prison block as cult leader Charles Manson and Herbert Mullins, whom we spoke about earlier. He did not like Herbert because he thought he was just a cold-blooded killer with no rhyme or reason. I guess it takes one to know one. Herbert would single out in the communal areas. So Ed, who towered over Herbert, would pour water on him. Ed said of this, quote, "I threw water on him to shut him up. Then when he was a good boy, I'd give him peanuts." Herbie liked peanuts. This was effective soon because he asked permission to sing. That's called behavior modification treatment. Ed was reevaluated at the facility and found to have antisocial, narcissistic, and schizotypical personality disorders, not the original paranoid schizophrenia. He remained in general population and never seemed to be in danger, probably because due to his massive frame. He worked different positions, including psychiatrist, scheduler, made ceramic cups, and even narrated audiobooks for the visually impaired, which is wild that they allowed this. But in 2015, he suffered a stroke and retired from all of his positions. The next year, in 2016, he failed to provide a urine sample and received his first rules violation report. He also got a rules violation report in December 2024 when he grabbed and slapped a male nurse's ass. When told it was inappropriate by a female nurse, he said he thought it was her. She in turn told him he cannot touch a nurse, male or female. How he never got written up prior to 2016 is beyond me, because early in his sentence, he sat down with FBI agent Robert Kessler. So Kessler conducted interviews with the likes of Dahmer, Richard Chase, and Ted Bundy. Well, when he met with Ed said, quote, "The guard isn't coming back. They're on a change of shift. He's not going to be here for 30 minutes. In that time, I could snap your head and leave it on the table. I'd own the prison if I killed a FBI agent." He said it was a joke when the guard returned after Kessler pressed the panic button. He's also been up for parole but he's been denied, or other times. Sometimes he was denied, other times he just denied attending. The last one occurred in 2024. He declined to attend his hearing. He's bound to a wheelchair and has diabetes and coronary heart disease. Despite his health, prison psychiatrists determined in April 2024 he is still at high risk to reoffend. Ed has been portrayed in the media many times, most known in Silence of the Lambs, where Buffalo Bill's character murders his grandparents. Also in American Psycho, Patrick Bateman incorrectly quotes Ed, but credits Ed Gein, not Kemper. Quote in the movie is, "You know Ed Gein said about women? He said, when I see a pretty girl walking down the street, I think two things. One part of me wants to take her out, talk to her, be real nice and sweet, and treat her right. The other part wonders what her head would look like on a stick." This comes from when Ed had asked about how he views women now. He chillingly said, quote, "When I see a pretty girl walking down the street, I think two things. One part wants to be real nice, and the other part wonders what her head will look like on a stick." Yeah, complete freak Ed is. There are other TV shows that had depicted Ed, like Mindhunter series had an episode based on his crimes titled Ed Kemper in the first season, episode 5. There are also many books about him and even songs referencing him. I have many thoughts on this weirdo. He's so disturbed. He had a hard childhood, this is true. That no way excuses him. He could have changed his path and done good. He was so intelligent, but instead he took his trauma out on innocent women. I'm so glad he could not become a police officer, because that would have made his crimes so much more easy, and I just think he'd be able to hide his crimes, and I mean, who knows, they maybe would have covered his crimes up for him. Cause I do like to find the silver lining of lessons that we can learn. We know now not to hitchhike. You never know who you're taking a ride from. And the driver can be in danger as well. Not obviously in Ed's case, but nonetheless. As of January 26th, Ed is still locked up at the California Medical Facility and is 77 years old. I want to bring it back to his victims, though. His grandparents, Maud, Matilda, and Edmund Kemper took him in. Sure, his grandmother's awful, but no one deserves what he did. Then he murdered 6 college students between 1972 and 1973, named Mary Ann Pesce, Anita Luchessa, Aiko Koo, Cindy Shaw, Rosalind Thorpe, and Alice Liu. They all had promised careers ahead of them and did not deserve what happened to them. Then we have his mother, Clarnell, Strandberg, and Sarah Taylor Hallett. His mother was a complete trash parent. Not gonna sugarcoat it. I get his anger, but I do not condone his actions. Maybe she could not show her affections, or maybe she's just evil in her own right. But he kept moving back. He could have just left, and now Sara, or Sally as she was referenced to, was nowhere near him. He didn't have to kill her or anybody, but like specifically he went, he targeted her. I want to know your opinion, but please be respectful. I believe in rational discussions using our individual life experiences and perspectives can allow us to think about things differently. Comment, subscribe, and like. If you have any future cases you'd like me to cover, please request a case in my forum in the description. Join me next time when I discuss a case for my Missing Mondays, where I discuss a missing toddler out of Washington State. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and stay safe. I do not want to make a video of you. Bye.